In these next two videos, we are going to be talking about puberty, sexual reproduction, and menstruation. We are aware that most of you watching these videos are already very educated on these topics. However, teaching these topics requires more than just medical knowledge. In the communities, you may have to teach fellow teenagers about these subjects in a culturally sensitive way. You may be surprised how little some of the adolescents in these communities know about these topics. But recognize that there's often no pathway in the culture to diffuse this information, which is where you come in.
A lot of sex ed. In Kenya, there is not an official health class the way we have in the United States that students have to take to learn about what's happening to my body as I go through puberty. So I have experienced a lot of students who have misunderstanding or lack of understanding of why they ovulate, or for boys, why their body goes through changes.
But we basically just talked about also, what's it called, just being, just like hygiene in general too, and just saying how, you have to clean yourself certain amounts of times a day, and kind of general stuff with that. And then we just talked about like discharge and menstruation and periods, but it was definitely surprising because a lot of them knew absolutely nothing about, their periods or anything. They had, like, most of the questions we got were, what's it called? Were, like, is it normal for me not to have my period yet? Is it normal? Like, when do people get them?
One of the obstacles that make it particularly difficult to teach these subjects will be the language barrier. It's already uncomfortable to talk about sex, so it is that much more difficult when you are not comfortable with the language. Keep this in mind and do the best you can to be culturally sensitive. We will present the information that you should teach, and we will provide commentary on how to present it in a culturally sensitive way.
The women and the young children, and then especially the older people, they didn't even speak Spanish, so it's like how you communicate this information to them is even harder just based on that.
Puberty is the time when your body matures from child to adult. This usually starts between ages 8 and 13 in girls and between 9 and 15 in boys. But everyone's body changes at different times and rates. It is extremely important to state that both boys and girls experience changes in their body during puberty. For example, many communities are aware that girls start menstruating, but are unaware that boys experience any changes during puberty. Puberty begins when the brain sends the hormone testosterone to the gonads, the ovaries in girls, and the testes in boys. Boys and girls experience many of the same changes, and they also experience many different changes. Both boys and girls experience growth spurts. They may grow much taller in a short amount of time. Emphasize that some parts of the body grow at different rates in different people. Adolescents will also experience hair growth on the underarms and pubic areas. It begins as light and thin and becomes darker and thicker during puberty. Boys also begin to grow hair on their faces. Boys' shoulders become wider, and their penises and testes become bigger. Their voices become deeper. Boys' voices will often crack during puberty. Remind boys that this is nothing to be embarrassed about. It is natural and it happens to everyone. Girls tend to grow curvier. Their hips get wider and they develop breasts. In both the developing and developed world, it may be alarming to a young girl if one breast is bigger than the other. Warn girls that this may happen and that it is normal for one breast to develop before the other. They will even out eventually. Skin gets more oily during puberty, causing some adolescents to experience acne. They may start to see pimples on their faces, chests, and backs. Tell them to avoid popping the pimples and to wash their faces regularly. Also, tell them to bathe more often and use deodorant if it is available, because boys and girls will start to sweat more and will likely start to smell.
During puberty, boys will experience erections. This is when the penis fills with blood and becomes hard. Erections may happen when boys think about sexual things or for no reason at all. and ejaculation is when semen, the fluid that contains sperm, comes out of the penis. This may happen while the boy is asleep, so his pants will be wet when he wakes up. These nocturnal emissions are referred to as wet dreams, and they occur less often as puberty progresses and eventually stop. This will likely be one of the most difficult subjects to teach. Present the information and reassure the boys that these occurrences are normal and nothing to be embarrassed about. And do your best to answer any questions.
Girls begin menstruation during puberty once the ovaries have reached maturity. The menstrual cycle is the process in which the uterus thickens in preparation to support an embryo and then sheds this additional lining in the absence of conception. This lining is expelled through the vagina. Women experience discharge of blood and other components of the lining. It is extremely important to emphasize that discharge, in addition to blood, is normal and healthy. Girls may experience discharge at any time. Some cultures are not aware of this, and there is a cultural stigma surrounding this discharge, which leads to wrongful shaming of girls. Additionally, it is important to teach girls how to manage their periods in a sanitary way. In the developed world, access to sanitary pads and tampons is very easy and relatively inexpensive. In much of the developing world, however, the access to these disposable sanitary products is limited, leading to use of reusable pads or cloths. These reusable items can facilitate infection if they are not properly cleaned and sanitized before use.
In a lot of countries, girls don't have access to sanitary pads or tampons or even things called menstrual cups, which go over the cervix and hold flow. And if you also don't have access to underwear or bathrooms and waters or privacy while you're at school, it makes it really challenging to be at school.
Lastly, when teaching about the importance of sanitary products, you should talk about how there are many bloodborne pathogens and how it is important to avoid blood exchange.
Well, there's a concern that if girls use non-sanitary products in the areas I've worked in rural Kenya, girls will take a handkerchief and wrap it around old rags or upholstery from inside an old stuffing of a chair, anything that's absorbent. And if they use that, they can get any kind of vaginal irritation. It doesn't even actually have to be an infection like vaginitis or vaginosis. It can just be an irritation.